There's been all different types of ways that deepfakes can have been utilized on people, but I would absolutely say I feel violated. I filed a lawsuit against two of the largest companies in the world, and it's not something that a sentence I ever in my life imagined saying.
Welcome on in, everybody. Tim Boyum here. So imagine that you do a TED Talk. It goes great. And then 7 years later, you find that part of that is magically in an international ad, except for you're saying things that you never said. AI manipulated what you said. That's what happened to our guest today. John McHugh with us as well. John, this is just, it's crazy.
It's weird. It's so weird. And it's you'll see once we get into it, just how niche even the TED Talk was for that to be found and then manipulate. It's mind blowing. We cover a lot of weird stories on this beat that we have chosen for ourselves. This one is like up there.
Yeah, and it's a little unnerving. So DeAndrea Salvador, who I also, by the way, happens to be a state senator from Mecklenburg County, Charlotte native. She's been in office since 2021. She was, I believe, the youngest at 30 state senator elected in North Carolina. But she did this TED Talk about energy. She was in her 20s, which had been exciting. Yeah. But the thing I take away, John, is like, despite like she's suing the company, Whirlpool was who did this ad. And we talk about regulations, but more than anything, we talk about this at the very end. I feel like she personally feels violated. Like, it's unnerving to think that someone can do this. Not only that someone can do it, but corporations, and it's just out there. And literally, as you'll see here in a little bit, the ad is still out there, but it just feels like a lack of control over yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, she mentions it a couple of times as like kind of taking away from the actual work that she did, which you'll see is adjacent in the same lane maybe as it, but totally different stats, totally different data, a country she's never, I presume, been to, nevertheless researched. It's like I don't know. I struggle to talk about it because it's such a foreign thing that is going to happen more. Like, this is not the last time we're going to see something like this.
Well, in last year's election, Biden's voice was manipulated for a radio ad. But this is just like a normal person. I mean, she is a state senator, but that has nothing to do with it, frankly. Yeah. And that part's really unnerving to think that could be what's out there. And what can we believe anymore?
I mean, even people who aren't, do this as a living, but people who don't put themselves out there, there's videos of you talking that people can find.
And what manipulate. Can you do about it? That is the freaky part. So let's get to the freaky story here. State Senator DeAndrea Salvador. Let's start with this. Let's not go into detail, but how crazy has this been? And like, have you been able to wrap your head around what has happened yet?
No, mainly because it just seems, as I do more and more searching and just trying to figure stuff out, new details come to light. And so it is still something that I'm digging through each and every day, trying to make sense of it, still trying to understand why something like this would have even happened to me or really happened to anyone. So still in the early stages of that.
So you were part of TED. You were a fellow because of your background, right? You did an energy speech. So talk first kind of about your background and that. What led to being a TED fellow?
Yeah. So I guess, well over a decade ago, I founded a nonprofit organization called the Renewable Energy Transition Initiative. We focused on high energy burdens, which is the percent of income spent on energy. And it was a really core focus of my work here in Charlotte, the Carolinas, and we did work throughout the Southeast. In that, there was a number of different advisory councils and other types of working commissions that I would work with and volunteer on. And so the speech was looking at some of the data that I come across over the years, as well as some of the stories that I personally witnessed, heard about, or communities I directly work with, and was talking about ways that we can think of driving more solutions for communities here in the Carolinas Carolinas in a way that can address energy burdens, but also look at our energy transition as well.
How do you even become a TED Fellow? And you were in your 20s still when you were doing all this, right?
Right. I founded the organization fresh out of college. In terms of becoming a TED Fellow, at least at the time, there was an application process. So you apply, you share your idea. There are additionally references that you share. You go through an interview process, and then ultimately they select 20 individuals from around the world based upon, like, again, the full application package. So I'm really honored that I was able to be a TED Fellow. It was something that, in terms of getting the opportunity to, as I mentioned, share the stories that were so deeply personal to me, was certainly it was really beneficial for some of the additional programs later and things of that sort in terms of spreading awareness about the issue of energy burdens, which is, I'm sure you've reported on, is still something that folks are concerned with today as we see electricity costs rising in and out, especially now.
You said you started out of this out of college. Like, what was it about this issue and this, starting that was so personal to you that you wanted to do this?
Yeah, really the front porch of my grandmother's house. I always grew up as like the kid on the block around a lot of older folks, at least on my grandmother's neighborhood. And frequently you might get asked to do certain things like, hey, can you write this piece of paper for me? Fill this out, or can you read this small print? So as I grew up, I would often hear stories and just people coming together talking. But one of the stories that struck me was a neighbor of my grandmother whose husband was he was elderly, but also he had heart issues. So his circulation was really difficult, and he had an incredibly tough time regulating his temperature. And then compound that with the fact that they were on a fixed income and struggling to be able to afford it. They would sometimes resort to using in the winter with their electric heat. It was particularly cold that winter, I remember, and they would use like a space heater or sometimes even talk about opening the oven. And I remember saying, well, that's really unsafe. That's not something, let's look and see what's out there. Let's think about what can be done. And at that same time, I was taking energy economics and working actually at the Electric Power Research Institute. And I saw this convergence of worlds, right, where you see cutting edge technology and things happening. And then you see, what are people's day-to-day lives? Like, what are they having to deal with? You were talking about a couple who moved into their home as young adults and on fixed incomes have limited ability to be able to renovate it and be able to weatherize it so that it could be more comfortable, cost efficient, and energy efficient. And then as I started to speak with her about what programs might be there, I started to very quickly see that just how limited federal programs, state programs are. I'm very thankful for those that do exist, but there's so many more in need who may never be able to utilize those programs. And in addition, there's a lot of solutions that can transition folks from needing to see themselves come to that really dire crisis assistance time and time again. Things like energy efficiency, things like utilizing at the time what were newer technologies to really be able to drive cost of living and better quality of life for folks. And so for me, it was something that was a direct connection to my work. But one thing that I always told people is I'm very technology agnostic. We never were coming in and saying, hey, you got to buy this appliance for this company or this type of thing. We were always keeping it centered in the community that I grew up in the communities that we were serving, and making sure that we were putting the people first and not coming at it as a nonprofit from some type of, corporate aim.
So then you become this TED Fellow. You get to do a TED Talk, which, I mean, millions of people see these things. First of all, what was that experience like? It had been nerve-wracking and exciting, right?
So as a child, I used to spend all of my time at my great-grandmother's house.
Yeah, more nerve-wracking than exciting, I will say. Thankfully, the program is incredible. They do a lot of prep, such that one, you go through a lot of fact checking to make sure that the content that you're sharing is accurate, is well researched. They can verify all of the sources. They give speech coaches and things of that sort. So I'm very thankful just for the prep that led into all of that. But you essentially, I spoke at the flagship conference, which is the one that is in, or at least was in Vancouver. So there's certainly a whole, slew of activities that lead up to that, meeting the other fellows, getting to see the stage, and to the point in which you give your talk. And so not all TED Talks that are given at the main conference make it onto the website. So I'm also, really honored that both to be selected as a TED Fellow, but also for them to showcase my work on the official TED website as well.
And I mean, it helped launch you in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you're a state lawmaker today. Like, it was a big moment for you in your career, right?
I would say it was a way to showcase the work I had been doing. It certainly brought a lot more eyes and visibility in ways to, different folks who maybe I wouldn't have met before. But I was really diligent to put the word and work out there. So even prior to becoming a TED Fellow, I was quoted and did a number of either writing or being interviewed for larger magazines, newspapers, things of that sort. And so the awareness has been it was an incremental approach, but TED certainly was something that I think folks know it for a reason. And that's because they have a lot of reach to reach different audiences and folks to give them ideas about ways that we can approach things.
So that was 2018. So tell me about the first moment that you heard about this Whirlpool ad.
Yeah. So I was checking my email and it was just this kind of you get a lot of emails, particularly being an elected official, but I think everybody now. I was just reading on LinkedIn about the different marketing emails that people might get or think this and that. But it was unique in that I was receiving an email that had a domain that was very clearly not from the US, which is pretty atypical, particularly coming directly to my legislative email. And as this one that really caught my attention, it appeared to be from a like journalism type website. Again, the name was in a different language slightly. And it says something that kind of, how you might read something, you'd be like, I feel like I saw something else about that before. It reminded me of an email I scrolled past just maybe like a week or so prior, and that I just kind of said, oh, this clearly seems to be spam disregard. Uh, but upon like really kind of taking stock and taking like what is this all about and searching just literally my name and I think ad or it was something very not even targeted. I see myself and I see myself immediately then cutting two appliances. I see a celebration of awards. So by the time that I found this out, I don't remember the exact date in June, but
June of last year, right?
the yeah
2025.
June of 2025. I just recall not only seeing myself say things I never said, have content behind me, by all intents and purposes, in a way that people likely would think is real. I also saw this huge celebration at the same time that I'm literally kind of just getting kind of shocked to my core. I don't necessarily have the best way to describe seeing yourself without consent put on such a elevated stage, changed, erasing communities that you spent, literally well over a decade serving and working with and it to also be like images of folks cheering about it at the highest level. And so it was in some ways it feels like a blur because there was so much information coming at me incredibly quickly. And I like to say I really enjoy research. I love looking stuff up, but I was certainly not prepared for that because it's not something I ever imagined in that type of way, in that type of commercial sense.
So this was a foreign kind of PR ad company that was working with Whirlpool, right? And this was a foreign journalist that reached out to you first then?
It actually this what the way I saw it celebrated was through Omnicom and their subsidiary. So when I searched for it, there certainly was the DM9 entity, but we saw, or at least in my searching, where companies like DDB and Omnicom originally were showcasing this award in their investor newsletters, and they have a huge United States presence.
I'm gonna
And
stop you just for our audience real quick.
yes.
This is an award that ad that you're in won in some sort of ad contest, right?
Yeah, so Cons Leon receives over 26,000 submissions each year. My advertisement, which was, done without my consent and manipulated, won one of the top prizes, the Grand Prix, particularly the Grand Prix also in creative data, which if anybody has heard the manipulated content, pretty much the bulk of what I'm sharing is data before it cuts into the more direct pitch for the appliances. And so the advertisement was submitted to Cons Leon in Europe and was broadcasted there, as well as received the award there. And it was also distributed across the internet as well. And this is just based on what searching has showcased. There's a lot of unanswered questions that I still don't know to date.
So for those that have not seen the ad, and we'll put some up because it's still out there.
Uma geladeira nova, por exemplo, que estamos precisando bastante.
People are faced with impossible choices. In low-income communities in São Paulo, the average electricity bill cost represents 30% of their monthly income. This is when energy becomes a burden.
Console, the leading appliances brand in Brazil.
What was the message they were trying to express using both part of what was your TED Talk, but also then AI use after? What were they trying to connect there?
Yeah, so they have me essentially talking about the energy situation in Brazil as opposed to United States. And that's something that I've never, done direct work in Brazil. I certainly have not done extensive research on the energy situation there. And it is essentially taking bits and pieces of what was my genuine message to then essentially highlight and advocate for their program, which was doing financing for appliances. But one thing for me that also was personal, I take a lot of analytical thought and scrutiny into the type of work that I do. And I think as we think about solutions, we also have to think about unintended consequences. So what also struck me back in, the aloofness of them not really even engaging or having a conversation with me is that oftentimes some of these programs can be really have rebound effects for people, or it can be really regressive, where someone might sign on to a program and then find themselves locked into not truly seeing those savings. It's all based upon the program design, it's all based upon the implementation. And so to take my words, my likeness, my slides, and make it seem like I'm presenting something that is real is incredibly concerning, but also the timing. I gave my TED Talk back in 2018. The advertisement at Cons Leon was aired in 2025. I've been a state senator since 2021. And so it just, to me, is also the tying up me in this way that could appear, just ethically disingenuous is something too that is thrust on me again without consent, and has been a additional layer of frustration tied into all of this.
And it's not like it's just something, and this is Whirlpool, a major company that's out there, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I mean, just from a raw, when you first started seeing that, and then you obviously saw they used AI to make you say things you didn't say. I mean, was it hard to even believe it was real when you first started seeing it?
Yeah, it was hard to believe that it was something that I was dealing with at the time because it was the changes were done in such a specific and strategic way. It was non-obvious. Any reasonable person would have thought that that was me presenting and that I had likely consented or was a part of it because. Again, it is made to have the same cadence as the way I speak. You also see the all the visuals behind me. Any reference of the United States or my actual work that is visually there was changed to match the content of what they were saying. And to me, it doesn't, when you see that amount of layering, it doesn't give accidental whatsoever. It was a deliberate choice and it was broadcasted for commercial gain. That is a huge element here. And I think we have to continue to layer that this is a story of corporate responsibility or lack thereof, but also one of accountability. It should not ever be normalized that any entities believe that they are have the ability to utilize our very essence, our likeness in this type of way and not be held accountable.
So you see it, you start researching it, you realize obviously something is truly wrong here. What do you do? What were some of your first steps? Like, how do you, I mean, this is, first of all, they're international companies. The ad firm is not even in this country. Like, how do you even know where to start?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I just kind of jumped into the gear of what is really natural to me, and that's that research aim. I did everything I could find. I took screenshots and did Google image searches. I really tried to see like where is this? And even then, I'm still finding loose ends and threads today. But the first thing I did was talk to like my mom, my husband, just because I needed to tell somebody, just kind of get it out of what I was feeling and that loss of control, that loss of like, okay, this is what I'm seeing, but what else is out there? And then I immediately did let Ted know because through the TED Fellowship, there's still, a communication channel that I can reach out to and
That's
alert
copyrighted
them
material,
of.
right?
Yeah, so I have, yes, it's copyrighted material in addition to the research is copyrighted as well. So, and the transcript. And so, certainly let Ted know, in addition to starting to talk to friends where folks really strongly consider, particularly as it became the connections to larger companies. We're talking, Whirlpool, one of the largest, if not the largest appliance companies in the world, uh, DM9, which is a subsidiary of Omnicom, which is also one of the largest companies in the world. I was strongly advised to, seek legal counsel, just to further understand my rights and be able to approach this from a grounded way. So that's certainly something that I did as well. But the most initial bit of it was kind of just sharing my disbelief with those that were close to me, and I thank them for being that shoulder to lean on and to try to figure out. And the worst part is outside of the legislature, a lot of us have jobs, which myself included, and I had to even share to the CEO of the company that I work for that when a journalist was reaching out from all these other places to the company to try to get a quote, to let them know, hey, this is not some type of impropriety on my part. This is not something that I consented to. I even reached out to our internal legislative ethics commission or legislative ethics staff members, because I just wanted folks to know that if you were to look at this, it could you just give off this sense. And I certainly is not something that I wanted, asked for. And it was a huge kind of weight on my shoulders to do everything I can to clear it up. But to your point, the video is still accessible out there. It is, still very much ongoing. And to be clear, the company DM9, the subsidiary of Omnicom, sent a email, which you can find a copy of this in the complaint and the response that we submitted. They essentially said that they don't view that there is any governing laws in Brazil that go over it. And furthermore, they state that it was not necessarily, they argue if or not it was essentially broadcasted in Brazil or just Europe or other places. And so we've unfortunately just got a lot of runaround that we felt like our most and best path to accountability was to certainly move forward with the lawsuit, because this is something that we should, absolutely take a stand for, not just for myself, but as we could see a growing incentive for companies maybe not to take this as seriously as they should.
So, in other words, they don't deny that they manipulated the video. They're just saying that there's nothing that's stopping them from doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly send you the full letter, but they don't deny the video. They in the letter claim DM9's lawyer, which has a Omnicom signature, essentially claims that is consistent with my work, which I absolutely do not agree with. One, I am not and have not been in any advertisements for-profit corporations ever, but particularly doing a broad national, international advertisement since I've been elected. And additionally, it's not consistent with my work because my work is directly tied to things that I have done here in North Carolina, things that I have actually researched, words that I have actually said, not things that are falsities. So there's been all different types of things that folks can see from their motion to dismiss as well as their response letters that have been really disheartening. And I even, in that response, I had to put in writing, after being essentially having words put into my mouth, it feels very much like there is a continuation of that pattern through some of the documents and filings that they've been putting forth to date.
Has Whirlpool said anything, or are they just saying this is the agency that did this ad? It's just our name on it. Have they responded much?
They have not responded much outside of joining Omnicom and DM9. So they did a joint motion to dismiss. But one thing that I found, and my lawyers also have seen, is that when you look at Cons Leon, the kind of organization that the advertisement is for has to have some level of involvement through the rule submissions. Additionally, a very simple search, you will find videos of Whirlpool's head of branding and corporate communications that is both holding the award and smiling after it was awarded. Them, as well as the agencies, DM9, et cetera, were doing videos talking about its success. There's been a lot of finger pointing, at least in initial communication to me, et cetera. But there's a lot that could, at least to me, gives the sense that there's more happening than what meets the eye. Because again, but that's a big part of why I have a lot of questions. I still am left kind of scratching my head to why we even got here, and also why I have to put as much time into this. This is not how I, necessarily dreamed up spending my holidays is drafting my complaint in response to their motion to dismiss. But that is exactly how I spent some of my December. And so it's a time suck, but I think the accountability is important. I think we have to send a message that rules are meant to be followed. People's likeness, their essence of who they are should be respected. And if they're not, then there should be consequences to those actions.
We should say the award has been since retracted, right?
The award, to my understanding, has been since retracted, but again, there's not been a lot of direct communication, or there's things are still quite hazy in terms of all the details and ins and outs.
I think I probably know the answer to this, but have you gotten any answers about how they even came across this video and decided that this would be right for this advertisement?
So nothing definitive. Yeah, nothing definitive there. So the other thing is, I believe for Cons Leon, at least some amount of the video does have to be in English, if I'm not mistaken. And I am part of the only part that is in English. And a lot of Cons Leon is done to build notoriety among US markets, among those who are, in Europe as well. And so there's just, again, it's been head scratching as to why there's not been many answers. I'm still left searching for that. It is in part by I hope that in addition to the accountability, maybe there could be some closure about how my likeness was used, because yes, we do see this outcome, this final video, but where is our, what was the process that led up to it? How was I decided? Are there additional copies, or there outtakes of other things that they might have on file, or the individual? Like, there is so much that is still out there, but it is telling a story about, what the future could look like if we allow it to be normalized. And I certainly do not want that to be normalized. And I will continue to do this and other things for it not to be normalized.
So did you have to file this in their country then, right? I mean, this feels very daunting.
No.
Multi-world companies.
So we filed in North Carolina.
Okay.
We did that because, one, as a victim, I am in North Carolina. Additionally, both Whirlpool and Omnicom do have, to our understanding, business contacts in North Carolina. And the Cons Leon, the way that you look at where it's targeted to in terms of the audiences that it reach is very United States heavy. In fact, a huge portion of their revenue goes to that, because while originally on the internet it was reported that my advertisement was used as a part of the campaign, they have since said that maybe it was only the case study used in Cons Leon, which would have been Europe. But either way, they are impacting me here in North Carolina, as well as those who, the communities that I work with and serve. So we filed in federal court here in Charlotte.
So, the Wild West is a term that we always hear about technology and what we're doing and trying to regulate. And there's actually sort of a push against states, regulating AI, for instance. Based on what you've experienced, what are some of the first steps that you think need to be taken about this particular kind of issue about name and likeness and AI?
Yeah, I think one, certainly having something federal would be great, but in the absence of that, I genuinely believe states should have the ability to move, because the absence of us not making any movement is going to be incredibly detrimental to the communities that we serve, the communities we live in, but also to innovation too. When you think about the lack of trust that folks are starting to have just generally, but also in the utilization of AI. And there are the whole slew of what can be done is pretty vast. We've seen states that have gone to looking at having disclosures, or even being able to have contestability. So if someone's using artificial intelligence to make a decision, that the data that was utilized could be contested. There's some states or other places that are looking at it from a rights and harms base. So what are the most sensitive use cases, and starting there. But the fact of the matter is, we have to consider throughout the entire value chain of AI, what are ways that we can do additional clarifications and guardrails when needed. And if you start to look at other places, whether that be in Europe, but even China, et cetera, there are data privacy protections at a federal level. There is more being done in terms of the disclosures for AI with the EU AI Act. And so there's a lot that we're seeing from different states. Some are looking at doing a essentially creating ways to learn while legislating. So you see sandboxes, you see essentially more and more task force and commissions. But the fact of the matter is, we are experiencing the impacts of generative AI in particular, because that's what most folks are referring to as we're talking about this nowadays, but we're seeing the impacts already, whether that be from environmental electricity costs to information and disinformation, things of that sort. And I think that it is is completely our duty and obligation to not just step aside and just not deeply consider what are ways that we can make things better and be thoughtful as we see the rapid acceleration and progress.
We're out of time here, but one last question. The lawsuit aside, regulations aside, I get this sense talking to you that you feel kind of violated by this. Is that fair? What does that feel like?
Yeah, no, so it is definitely, and there's been all different types of ways that deepfakes can have been utilized on people, and there's been so many horrific things, but I would absolutely say I feel violated, and it's hard to describe. I like to say, like, if somebody was looking at you while you were taking a shower, and then they ran off, and you might not say, "Hey, I can't quantify how bad that felt," but like there was a wrong there. That it didn't feel right, and it's not something that you were okay with. And it is to the point of where if somebody just feels like that they can turn you into their talking head, that they can broadcast you any and everywhere and make you say whatever it is to fit their narrative. In this essence, it's just can be a little, in their words, different. In my words, I feel like it's arguably incredibly a huge margin, but it's a very slippery slope of what are we slowly allowing to happen? What happens to our sense of control of how we control who we are, like just how I show up, and that sense of agency. And so to me, it is very violating because I filed a lawsuit against two of the largest companies in the world. And it's not something that a sentence I ever in my life imagined saying, but that violation is something that I hope that we can either through this case or as we see more laws and regulations that we can reduce that violation or even more egregious violations from occurring, because it's something that is not right, it's not okay, and we should do everything we can to look it straight in the eye and come up with better paths for it.
Yeah, it's wild to think about. People can make you say things you didn't, and it just goes out there. I mean, and we're at the beginning of this, nowhere near at the end, so it's just wild. Sen, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
If you want to keep up with what's happening in North Carolina politics and hear more conversations with people shaping our state and beyond, subscribe to our channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, elections, and issues that matter to you.